Robert Lee Yates, known as the Spokane Serial Killer, was responsible for a string of murders in Spokane, Washington during the 1990s and early 2000s. One of his most notable crimes was the murder of Jennifer Joseph. The disappearance of Jennifer Joseph. Jennifer Joseph was a 16-year-old runaway when she met Robert Lee Yates in the summer of 1997. She was struggling with a troubled home life and had fallen into a life of drug addiction and prostitution. Unfortunately, her vulnerability made her a target for Yates. In August 1997, Jennifer Joseph disappeared, leaving her family deeply concerned and desperate for answers. She was last seen alive in Spokane's East Sprague Avenue area, a known area for prostitution and drug activity. Discovery of the body. Tragically, Jennifer's lifeless body was found in November 1997 in a secluded area near the Spokane River. She had been shot multiple times. Her murder added to the growing list of unsolved homicides in the Spokane area. Investigation and arrest. The investigation into Jennifer Joseph's murder was part of a broader effort to apprehend the Spokane serial killer. Law enforcement had been working diligently to connect the dots between a series of unsolved murders of women in the area. In 2000, a breakthrough occurred when Yates was arrested in connection with the murders of several women, including Jennifer Joseph. DNA evidence and other forensic information tied him to the crimes. Yates' trial and confession. During his trial, Yates admitted to the murders of Jennifer Joseph and many others, ultimately confessing to 13 murders. He had lured his victims with promises of money for sex and then killed them. Yates's cold and calculated demeanor during his confession shocked the courtroom. Sentencing and imprisonment. In 2002, Robert Lee Yates was sentenced to 408 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the murders of 13 women, including Jennifer Joseph. He received the death penalty for 2 of the murders. Yates remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary. Impact and legacy. The case of Jennifer Joseph and the Spokane serial killer left a profound impact on the Spokane community and highlighted the vulnerability of marginalized individuals, particularly those involved in sex work and drug addiction. The investigation also emphasized the importance of connecting cases and using forensic evidence to solve complex murder mysteries. Robert Lee Yates was born in Spokane, Washington. He came from a military family and had a relatively normal childhood. As a young man, he served in the U.S. Army, where he gained skills as a helicopter pilot. Marriage and family. Yates married and had 5 children. On the surface, he appeared to be a devoted family man and a respected member of the community. He worked as a helicopter pilot, sometimes transporting dignitaries and high-ranking officials. Double life. Beneath his seemingly stable exterior, Yates had a darker side. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, he began a spree of violence that would later earn him the moniker of the Spokane Serial Killer. Murder spree. Between 1996 and 1998, Yates murdered at least 13 women in the Spokane area. His victims were often prostitutes and vulnerable women with troubled lives. He would pick them up, sometimes offering them money for sex, and then murder them, often by shooting them. He would then dump their bodies in remote locations. Investigation and arrest. The investigation into the string of unsolved murders was challenging, as Yates led a seemingly ordinary life and didn't attract suspicion. However, in 2000, he was arrested after a sex worker was able to escape from his vehicle and provide critical information to the police. Trial and conviction. During his trial in 2002, Yates admitted to the murders of 13 women. He was found guilty and received a sentence of 408 years in prison without the possibility of parole. In addition to this, he was sentenced to death for 2 of the murders. Additional confessions. While in prison, Yates continued to cooperate with law enforcement and confessed to additional murders in Washington state and other locations. His total number of victims may be higher than the 13 for which he was convicted. Impact and legacy. Robert Lee. Yates' case shed light on the difficulty of identifying serial killers who lead double lives and the vulnerabilities of marginalized individuals in society. His case also underscored the importance of using forensic evidence and advanced investigative techniques to connect seemingly unrelated crimes. The legacy of Robert Lee Yates is one of infamy and serves as a stark reminder of the capacity for evil that can exist behind a facade of normalcy. His crimes and subsequent conviction have left a lasting impact on the criminal justice system and the community of Spokane, Washington. Some intriguing and unsettling facts about Robert Lee Yates. Military background. Yates served in the U.S. Army as a helicopter pilot, and he was honorably discharged in 1976. His military training would later become relevant in his civilian career as a helicopter pilot. Family man. Image. Yates presented himself as a family man with 5 children and a seemingly stable life. This image of normalcy starkly contrasted with the brutal crimes he committed, targeting vulnerable women. Many of Yates' victims were sex workers and marginalized women. He preyed on their vulnerability, knowing that their disappearances might not receive as much attention from law enforcement. Methodical approach. Yates had a methodical approach to his murders. He often picked up his victims, offered them money for sex, and then killed them. He would later dump their bodies in remote locations, making it difficult for investigators to connect the crimes. Escapee's testimony. Yates was arrested after a brave sex worker managed to escape from his vehicle and provided crucial information to the police. This escape led to his capture and the unraveling of his crimes. Cooperation with law enforcement. While in prison, Yates cooperated with law enforcement and provided information about additional murders he had committed. This cooperation helped solve several unsolved cases, and he confessed to more murders than he was initially convicted of. Sentenced to death. In addition to receiving a 408-year prison sentence, Yates was sentenced to death for the murders of 2 women. He has remained on death row for years, awaiting execution. Unknown victim count. The exact number of victims attributed to Robert Lee Yates is not definitively known. He confessed to 13 murders in Washington state, but hinted at additional victims in other locations, leaving a lingering sense of uncertainty about the full extent of his crimes. Impact on legislation. Yates' case played a role in shaping Washington state's Yates Law, which allows for the collection of DNA samples from those convicted of certain crimes. This law aims to assist in solving cold cases and preventing future crimes. Continued fascination. Robert Lee. Yates' case continues to be a subject of fascination for true crime enthusiasts, journalists, and researchers. It serves as a chilling example of how a seemingly ordinary individual can lead a double life as a serial killer.